John Smith is a mechanic who works at Sample Auto Parts Incorporated in Keizer, Oregon. On Thursday, August 19th, he experienced lightheadedness in the maintenance shop and was provided a medical evaluation by a physician. The doctor discovered John had been exposed to carbon monoxide. Based on the physician's recommendation, John didn't return to work until Wednesday, August 25th. So this is something we should enter into our 300 log. First thing we need to do with any incident is to assign it a case number. This is a number the employer or whoever is filling out the case assigns. You don't need to get this from anyone else. It's the number you give it. We'll call this case number 1. So for every instance, you'll have an employee's name. Now, if this were a privacy concern case, you would not put a name here. You would put a reference number or something you could tie this back to another OSHA 300 log where you could have the person's name kept confidential so it's only releasable to certain people. The next block is a job title. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It could be welder, painter, support, or secretary. So if this person works in a maintenance shop, we could label him as a maintenance worker. The date of the injury is the date the incident happened. Or if you don't know when the incident happened, you could put in the date it was diagnosed, or the date when you found out about it. Always go back to the earliest possible time of when it actually happened. In this instance, we have a date listed of when the incident occurred, so that's the date we'll put in, August 19th. The next block is where the event happened. So where in the premises was John Smith? Was he in the loading dock, the maintenance shop, or the warehouse? Where did it actually happen? Sometimes you may not know, especially if it's an exposure to something like carbon monoxide. It could have been everywhere inside the facility. In a case like that, where you can't nail down precisely where the person was, especially if it's everywhere, just put where he normally is. In this case, it's a maintenance shop. In the next block, briefly describe the illness. We don't have to get super complex here, and you don't have to put a whole lot of detail. Just enough so it gives you an idea of what actually happened. In this case, you would put carbon monoxide poisoning. The reason you don't have to get so complicated in this one is that we would be filling out an 801 form, and that gives you a lot more space to flush out what actually happened. In the 300 log, it's less critical to have a lot of information about the incident because the 801 form will have that info. In the next block, we need to classify the case. This is the most serious result of that incident. It goes from most serious to least serious, but you only need to fill in one of these boxes per incident. Sometimes as time progresses, a more serious result may happen because of the incident. In this case of carbon monoxide poisoning, he was given days away, so already starting with days away from work. The only way this will change is if later on, because of the incident, this person died, and in which case we would erase it from block H, from days away from work, and move it over to block G, for death. In the next block, you enter either the days away from work or if there was a transfer. Even if there was a transfer or a restriction in the previous section, you still only mark the most serious result. So you may only mark days away from work, and then you enter the number of days away. But if there was a restriction in addition to that, you would still mark the number of days away even if you didn't mark that in the previous section because it's still the most serious result. Conversely, if you had marked job transfer or restriction in the previous section and here you record it as days away from work, you would have marked the wrong section. The next block classifies what type of incident we're dealing with here. Was it an injury, a skin disorder, a respiratory condition, poisoning, hearing loss, or any other illness? Carbon monoxide poisoning is what we're dealing with here, so we'll enter this as poisoning. Once you either get to the bottom of the page or to the end of the year, you'll have to add up the different numbers for classifying these cases from the type of injury or illness, and add up the numbers and carry those over to the next page. Or if it's the end of the year, those are the numbers you record on the 300A summary, which we'll be covering next. Don't forget your establishment information in the top right corner. So that's basically the 300 log.